A lot of my research and work's really focused on a planner named Harland Bartholomew, who came to Louisville in the late 20s, early 30s to write the first comprehensive plan. Bartholomew was the first city planner in the country. He actually came up with a zoning ordinance that replaced racialized zoning. And he said the purpose of zoning was really to prevent the movement of Black people into finer residential districts. And so he was very explicit about what zoning was for. He was very proud of what he called the colonization of city planning. He studied colonial town planning in South America, in places like South Africa, and he tried to bring those same practices and patterns of colonial town planning to the United States. Just an example of one of the more insidious things he would do is he would estimate where Black people would move in cities, and he would zone those areas industrial, right? Which ensured that Black people would live next to noxious and toxic sites to the present moment, right? And so if we think about the public health disparities that we have in this country, if we think about statistics like Black kids have 4 times the rate of asthma as white kids, these things are not happenstance, these things are not accidental. They were very much purposeful and designed, which I think by 2021 we all kind of accept that as our reality, and we don't need to kind of go over that as much as we used to. But maybe I'm wrong. And so when he comes to Louisville, and he was asked to go to Russell specifically and deal with what the Louisville leaders called the Negro housing problem at that time. And so he goes into Russell, and this is what he finds when he gets to Russell. He finds this design pattern in Russell, right? This is Muhammad Ali in 12th and 13th. This is where Beecher Terrace is today. And so the design pattern on the left is what urban planners call traditional neighborhood design. It's kind of what city planners kind of salivate over, right? Like every city planner wants to create this development pattern, right? Think about Norton Commons, right? This is what we're trying to build all over the country. This is what we call a livable block. It has storefronts that come up to meet the street. It has ancillary dwellings in the back. It has affordable housing over the storefronts. It has rear alley access. This is the type of block where someone could meet their daily needs without a car. Has a mixture of uses, a mixture of building types, a mixture of incomes. This is everything that urbanists want in a neighborhood. And this is also a space where Black people had economic and cultural achievement at this time. There are only a couple times in our nation's history where, as a group, Black people were actually generating wealth and capital. And it was actually happening during this time all over the country. If you think about the Black Wall Streets and places like that. And so Bartholomew goes into these neighborhoods and recommends their wholesale destruction. He recommends the bulldozing of these neighborhoods and that they be replaced with the type of design that you see on the right. This was his design suggestion, which is you don't have to study, you don't have to study the principles of architecture to see that that is rooted in containment, it's rooted in enclosure, and it's rooted in social and economic isolation. And so again, those things were very much purposeful and designed. As he goes back to the Louisville city leaders, he has this justification for demolishing these buildings. He said there are a number of obstacles that are fundamental for any scheme for improving housing. And he said a lack of desire among a large portion of the population for something better than they are accustomed to. He said in this document, this is part of the city's first comprehensive plan, he says if it were possible to create among the Negro masses a real desire for decent accommodations, the slums would automatically eliminate themselves. And so what you find here is this narrative that was later perpetuated by people like Oscar Lewis and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, that somehow Black people's poverty is rooted in their own cultural deficiency and not a systemic issue, and therefore public policy is basically absolved of any responsibility. And if we think about Bartholomew, we have to think about how strong his influence was, right? So here is a map of all of Bartholomew's comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances from 1920 to 1948. This doesn't even touch his work on interstate highways. He was actually in charge of placing interstate highways in cities. He was also the first city planning professor in the country. So while he is designing these white supremacist design patterns and comprehensive plans in cities, he's training other planners to go back to their respective cities and implement the same patterns. And so we really can't overstate that the urban design patterns that we traverse in the United States are rooted in white supremacist ideology, right? And not just the urban design patterns, but also the economic practices, the lending practices, the financial practices, all come from people like Bartholomew and that desire to isolate and enclose Black communities to keep them without land, political power, and capital. And so that brings us up to the 30s. And